And you look great. I appreciate you for joining me for this podcast. I am a little under the weather for anybody watching, so I may be coughing in the background, but don't worry about that. Just get this good information. um, this person here, she has way too many certifications and licenses and everything. I can't even begin to list them all, so I'm gonna let her do it.
So my name is Dr. Davena Longshore. I have a doctorate in clinical psychology with a concentration in forensic psychology. Forensic psychology is police, criminal, and military psychology. I also have 2 master's degrees, one of which is in psychology, another is in computer information systems. I have a certification as a master life coach, a certification as a business coach, a certification as a holistic health coach because I have an education in integrative nutrition. A few other things, but they're not relative to this conversation. I currently live on the West Coast, so it is extremely early. My time is 6:58 a.m. my time. But thank you for having me. Glad to be able to share the information that I learned with others. That's the purpose of me having an education, is so that I can share it with others and educate others.
Yeah. Well, that's dope. One day I'll be that great. So I wrote the questions down on note cards. So if that's what you see me looking at, I'm just trying to keep my flow together. All right, so I'm gonna just jump right into it. What is complex trauma? Because I don't even think a lot of people even know.
So honestly, a lot of people shouldn't necessarily know that terminology. It is a term researchers have given to the phenomenon of experiencing multiple traumas for a prolonged period of time. So when I say it's a term that people really shouldn't know, in a clinical setting, it's funny because when you sent me that question, I kind of cringed with the terminology, because in a clinical setting, I would never tell someone that they have complex trauma. You never want to use terminology that can stigmatize a person or make things more difficult for a person to grasp or understand. When people hear the word complex, it can yield to them thinking something is complicated, which for them could mean it's going to be very complicated for me to get over the effect of the traumas from my past. So in a clinical setting, you won't hear a therapist, a mental health counselor, a psychologist say, oh, you have complex trauma. And it's not a diagnosis. So it's not something you'll hear in a clinical setting, but it is a research terminology.
That's actually very good to know. I never. That makes sense. What are some of the effects that trauma can have on the human psyche and daily functioning?
So that is a vast, vast question with so many different answers, right? Because the human mind is so extremely complex, right? And depending on the developmental period in a person's life will depend on how trauma manifests itself. And when I say developmental period, meaning what age a person is in life, right? Because the brain develops in different stages, and the emotions and the personality and the mind, it develops in different stages depending on your age. So in a child, right, maybe 5 years old, you may see extreme social anxiety where they don't want to be around people. You may see bedwetting, right? You may see fits and tantrums, crying all the time for no reason. You may see dissociation, right? And what we call dissociation is almost a disconnection from reality. So a child that kind of seems to be emotionless, right? In a teenager or adolescent, you may see rebellion, anger, right? Rage, fighting. You may also see bedwetting, right? You may see social anxiety, right? Or seclusion. In an adult, you may see difficulties in interpersonal relationships, right? Difficulties getting along with people, difficulties maintaining and keeping relationships. You may see anger, right? You may see difficulties in keeping jobs, difficulties with money. You may see substance abuse. You may see domestic violence, right? And those are just some things. You definitely may see mental disorder. The more trauma you experience in life, it yields to a higher likelihood of having multiple mental issues like depression, anxiety, PTSD, or post-traumatic stress disorder, right? So you may also see something like that in an adult. So trauma can manifest itself in several ways. It will impact every part of your life, your employment, your relationships with your family, your relationships with your partners, girlfriends or boyfriends, your relationships with your children. It will impact your children, right? And what they model and who they end up becoming. It'll impact every part of your life.
Makes sense. Is there research to support the idea that trauma and PTSD can be passed down through generations through DNA?
Yes. So believe it or not, there are many mental disorders that are hereditary. And when we say hereditary, it means that it makes you more susceptible to it. Again, the human mind is so complex, there's no like cookie cutter answer to it. When you start mixing genes with environment, with experience, is when you get mental disorder, right? But there are some mental disorders that you can be more susceptible to getting if your parents or your grandparents had it. And PTSD is one of those. If you ever visit, especially a psychologist, during the intake, they will actually ask you, is there anyone in your family that has mental disorder? And they're asking that because it will increase the likelihood that you may have the same or a mental disorder within the same group as the one that they have, depending on your experiences in life and what you went through, or traumas, car accidents, head injuries, right? What you eat, all of that combined, right, yields to mental illness.
Yeah, so with my podcast, I think that anyone can really benefit from the information that's presented, but my personal focus is the Black community. Is there research to support the idea that trauma and PTSD can be passed down through generations through DNA?
Yes. So believe it or not, there are many mental disorders that are hereditary. And when we say hereditary, it means that it makes you more susceptible to it. Again, the human mind is so complex, there's no like cookie cutter answer to it. When you start mixing genes with environment, with experience, is when you get mental disorder, right? But there are some mental disorders that you can be more susceptible to getting if your parents or your grandparents had it. And PTSD is one of those. If you ever visit, especially a psychologist, during the intake, they will actually ask you, is there anyone in your family that has mental disorder? And they're asking that because it will increase the likelihood that you may have the same or a mental disorder within the same group as the one that they have, depending on your experiences in life and what you went through, or traumas, car accidents, head injuries, right? What you eat, all of that combined, right, yields to mental illness.
Yeah, so with my podcast, I think that anyone can really benefit from the information that's presented, but my personal focus is the Black community.
Mm-hmm.
And so, like the information that you just gave, trauma and mental illness is being passed down. Is there, what am I trying to say? So, how do you think, I guess, slavery and all that stuff that happened, um, how has it, I'm probably gonna cut this shit out right here. um, what's an example of this type of stuff being passed down in the Black community?
Wow.
Like, that's a big question.
It is. It again is a question that has so many different answers to it, right? But for example, so I'm going to use the brown community first, right? Because I have a research example for that. Unfortunately, our field lacks a lot of Black people in it. And so there's not as much research as there should be on a lot of the things that impact the Black community. Again, hence why I went into the field, right? So I'm going to use brown people first, okay? There was research done on the great-grandchildren of Holocaust survivors, right? And what they found was, even though the great-grandchildren weren't, they had never experienced trauma, they had PTSD. So the trauma from their parents was genetically passed down to not just their children, but their great-grandchildren. And there's research that supports this. Now, the research in this field, specifically when it comes to PTSD and hereditary, is really new. So there's not a lot of it, right? But we can hypothesize, right? We can take that situation and hypothesize concerning the Black community and slavery, the impact of slavery. And slavery has had so many impacts, negative impacts on the Black community, and it's really sad because I remember working in the corporate arena as a corporate trainer, and having to teach multiculturalism and diversity in the corporation, and, people of other colors being upset at the end of it, and coming to me and saying, slavery ended 400 years ago. You really should get over it, right? And I wish it were that simple. But while slavery as an out front thing has ended, right? And of course, now I'm pulling kind of like on my dad. My dad was an educator, a civil rights activist, a researcher when it came to the Black community and education and the impact of it, right? My dad is known for suing the Department of Education for insufficient funding for his Black and Hispanic district and winning. Okay, so he helped write the math part on the ACT. My dad's research was the first research that showed that mathematics on standardized testing was biased against the Black community. Okay, so right now I'm a little out of my psychological scope, right? And I'm pulling on the information I learned from living with a father that was in that field, right? So yes, slavery ended hundreds of years ago, right? But then there was segregation and Jim Crow laws, right? there's still mass incarceration, right? There's still macro, what we call in psychology, macro and micro aggressions. And what those are is in your daily life, you're dealing with the negative, the unconscious and conscious negative biases and beliefs and stereotypes that people have about the Black community, right? We're dealing with that on a daily basis. And that in itself is traumatic, okay? It's traumatic. New research, this is recent research, still shows that people are biased in employment, right? If you have an ethnic name, they're less likely to pull your application. You know, if you have a name like Quintavia, right? Or Faria, you know, which is Muslim, right? You're less likely to get your application pulled than a John or a Karen, right? Or a Susan. And this is recent research. This is not. So, you know, to hear people say, well, slavery was 400 or so years ago, get over it. We're still dealing with the impacts of it. So while research can't necessarily show psychologically, again, because there's not a lot of research, that because of slavery, the Black community may be dealing with some trauma issues. We can just look at the present and see that, because we're still in the aftermath of slavery. You know, you're still dealing with negative biases. You can't get over all these years of the media painting Black people as still being, you know, angry, destructive, the ones who are mostly on welfare and getting food stamps, the ones who are having all the babies, even though research is completely against this, right? Research says completely the opposite. I mean, we're 12% of the population, and we've been at 12% for a really long time. We're obviously not having all the babies, okay? You know, you go into, I remember going into like a baby store when I was pregnant and seeing like the baby wrap, and it was two different advertisements. One was a white woman with her white husband in the baby wrap smiling, and the other one was a Black woman alone, right? Even those unconscious things, they're traumatizing to our community to deal with, and we deal with it on a daily basis. And sometimes I think because one thing research does say about the Black community is we're extremely resilient. And that is something that they're studying now, because we seem to be more resilient than any other race in America. So because we're so resilient, we just think to ourselves, this is just life. You have to keep going. You got to keep paying the bills. You got to keep taking care of the kids, right? But we're consistently being traumatized by sending out applications, being more educated than others and not getting a job, right? I remember going on interviews. This is when I was in the computer world. And people were so biased, even though my resume said Davena, their bias caused them to think David. So they thought they were meeting a male when they saw me in person, because there's a bias that only men are good at computers and math. Math and statistics is what my bachelor's degree is in. And it was traumatizing, you know? Not only them letting me know we thought you were a male, but then also not believing that I had these degrees, so making me multiply in front of them on interviews, right? And this is current day. These are the experiences of Black and brown people current day. This is not 400 years ago. This is right now. And these experiences are traumatic. And I don't think the Black community realizes that they've endured trauma and the impact that it's having on them. Sometimes people say we're angry, right? We seem angry all the time, you know, or we seem so hyper vigilant, right? all the time, irritable all the time. Well, those actually are symptoms of PTSD, right? And PTSD comes from trauma, experiencing a trauma, right? So maybe it's not that Black people are angry, right? Maybe it's that this Black person is consistently dealing with macro and microaggressions within their workplace, within their community, when they go to the grocery store and they get followed just because they're Black, right? My son, I mean, he's 16 years old. When I go into the grocery store with him and he separates from me, I watch security follow him. This is current day. My son is so gentle and small. He looks just like me. He's small for his age. And I mean, if he found $100 bill on the ground in the store one time, he picked it up and took it to the cashier. Didn't even keep it, took it to the cashier and said, hey, I think somebody dropped this, right? And this is the young boy that security is following around the store every time we go in the store. That is traumatic. It's traumatic as a Black woman to have to, at 6, 5, 6, 7 years old, have a talk with your Black male son about how to interact with the police, you know, and what he may endure because he's a Black male, and racism. These things are traumatic. And I don't think the Black community realizes what they really endure on a daily basis and the impact this having on their mental health.
With you talking about us being traumatized daily, something that came to my mind, if I can squeeze an extra question in, what do you think about all these videos that are being passed around of police brutality and us being shot and killed on camera? It's like I don't know, because anytime you see a video now, or at least for me, anytime I scroll and I see a video that involves police and Black people, it's like I have to brace myself if I decide to watch, if I can handle it that day. Mm-hmm. And it's like I'm like holding my breath and squeezing my butt cheeks until the end of this video, trying to see what's happening or who they're gonna kill today. Or it's just like I feel like that's traumatizing to deal with that all the time.
It is. One of the first criteria for PTSD is that you either have to experience a trauma or witness someone else experiencing it. So everyone needs to kind of know themselves when it comes to viewing those videos online. I have had people come to me for therapy because they viewed videos like that online and they were unable to handle it emotionally and psychologically.
Some days I just can't deal with it. And I feel like it's affecting me a lot because my younger cousin, he went to college. I mean, he's probably going to be a junior this year, but he plays football in Alabama. He goes to Troy. He's on the football team. He posted a video of himself running, like jogging on some road in Alabama. There was nothing out there. It was just land. It was him. And I was just freaking out because like my mind was just going back to Lamar Arbery and just all the others. And I called my friend and I started crying because I was just worried that somebody might pull up on him because he's dark skinned. He's probably 6'2", I don't know, he's really tall. Since he got to college, his muscles are even bigger, playing football. So like he looks massive and he's really gentle and friendly and respectful and everything, but it really doesn't matter when you get into a certain type of mindset, especially in a state like Alabama. And it was just a lot. And I just started crying just because he was jogging on some random road in Alabama. Um, yeah.
Well, this is, you just brought up kind of an unspoken truth in the Black community, especially with Black mothers. I've spoken to a lot of Black mothers who just live in constant fear when their sons leave the house, or their husbands leave the house, that they may not come back because of, the things that go on in the community. And it was happening before people were recording it. I remember being younger as a Black female and being stopped and harassed. And I wasn't doing anything. Never broke a law in my life. But I've been stopped and harassed. I was aware of the law, extremely aware of the law. Again, even with my doctorate, my concentration is forensics, and forensics is where psychology and the law meet. So I know the law very well, and that helped me in that situation. But a lot of Black mothers that I've spoken to live in a constant fear that their sons and their husbands won't return home. And that is traumatic. That can mean that when the son leaves to go to school, that's traumatic for them. Or if they go to the store, it's traumatic for them. If the husband goes out at night, it's traumatic for them, and they're dealing with this on a daily basis.
It's gonna be wrong. How does food play a role in the current conditions of a lot of people's experiences, Black people's experiences in America today?
So I don't think people realize that everything you put in your mouth has an impact on the brain, right? Mm-hmm. So the brain is actually the organ that is telling all the other systems in your body what to do, right? And it communicates this through releasing different hormones or chemicals or stopping the release of them. So anything you ingest will have an impact on the hormone that the brain releases. So just like you take aspirin or Tylenol or ibuprofen for a headache or for cramps or for pain, right? Well, the reason why it stops it is because it is having an impact on what the brain releases, right? Same thing with food. So there's research that shows that alcohol actually contributes to depression and anxiety. Okay. There's research that shows that ingesting things like pineapples and salmon and nuts regulates serotonin production, right? Serotonin is a hormone that makes you feel good. And so that can combat mental disorder. There's some mental disorders that exist because there's a dysregulation of serotonin in the brain. So the food that we eat definitely has an impact on our mood and how we feel and our mental state.
Do you use nutrition to help your clients?
It depends on the client. If I have a client who has attention issues, one of the things I am going to ask them is, what are you eating? Are you eating a lot of what we call simple carbs? So simple carbs, white potatoes, cereal, white bread, pasta, right? All of these convert to sugar. And sugar causes your brain to tell your organs to overproduce everything. People don't realize that sugar actually plays a huge role in high blood pressure and cholesterol. People think that is just like high fatty foods, but it's not. The body needs cholesterol. When you eat the right type of fat, you actually cause your body to not have to produce as much of it. You overproduce it when you consume sugar. So I will ask people who have attention problems, what are you eating? Because it may be a diet thing. I will ask people who deal with depression and anxiety, or have a mood disorder, what are you eating, right? Can we modify your diet in some way to maybe help with your treatment, to help with the psychotherapy, to help with the medication if you're on a medication for a mental disorder? So yes, I do incorporate nutrition in with psychotherapy.
So just to be clear, you can improve your daily functioning and your mood by adjusting what you eat.
Definitely. People, people go on this craze of exercising and eating a specific way because they want to lose weight. And they go on these diets, but eating healthy should be a way of life because it does impact you mentally and psychologically.
If someone was interested in seeing a therapist, are there certain things that they should look for when they're choosing a particular practice or a particular therapist?
So this is an interesting question to me because I saw a thing on Instagram the other day. Someone had posted like this picture of, if you see this, and this, and your therapist run, right? Yeah. And it was humorous, but I didn't necessarily agree. Okay. If a person is a mental health counselor, it means that they have a master's in mental health counseling. It means they did 2.5 years of graduate school. They did probably a total of somewhere around 2,000, 3,000 supervised hours, right? They know what they're doing. If someone has a doctorate in clinical or counseling psychology, they did a program that took them 6 to 8 years, the same amount of time as a medical doctor, okay, to complete. They did somewhere around 5,000, okay, supervised hours before getting licensed, okay? They know what they're doing. I will never doubt the ability of a licensed mental health professional. Now, where it comes in of whether or not someone is good for you is all about personality, right? We all learn about the same type of treatment methods, but the vehicle it comes in is going to be different because it's going to be based on the professional personality of the person that you're seeing. So that is what you're looking at when you meet with a therapist or a psychologist. Does your professional personality click with my personality? That's what you need to be looking for.
That's pretty good to know because I have left someone before because I didn't like that she was talking to me, so I just didn't go back. I mean, you kind of touched on this question earlier. Does cultural representation play a role in the effectiveness of therapy? You were saying that there weren't a lot of, I guess, maybe Black and brown therapists in the field.
They're not. Our field is dominated by white males. And cultural representation does play a huge part because one, a lot of times research doesn't get done unless the person cares. And normally people in my field do research on what matters to them. So when you don't have a lot of Black or brown people in our field, you don't get a lot of research that impacts the Black and the brown community. So that's one. And if you don't get a lot of research that impacts the Black and brown community or on the Black and brown community, then you don't have a lot of treatments and understanding of how to treat the Black and Brown community. Another way it impacts mental health and people seeing mental health providers is research shows that people normally want to go to a therapist that is like them in some way. Okay. For the Black and the Brown community, race is a huge thing. And I got angry. So I'm not really a TV watcher. I don't listen to talk shows, you know. But I was told about a show, The Breakfast Club, right? Where one of the individuals, Black, on it stated that he would not go to a Black therapist. And he said because they were ghetto. And when I was told this, I was highly offended, okay? Because first of all, to go through the program that I went through to get a doctorate in clinical psychology, there is nothing ghetto about it, okay? It takes a lot of hard work, a lot of dedication, and a very, very long time, okay? We have very, very strict ethical rules by our governing body, okay? Our rules are stricter than medical doctors, okay? So to say that a therapist is going to be ghetto or unprofessional because they're Black, that in itself shows some type of unconscious, you know, bias against your own race, just honestly, okay? Yeah. Now, I've had people come to me because Black people come to me because I'm Black. Brown people come to me because I'm Black, right? Because they felt like I, over someone who was not of their race, would understand what they were going through better because I'm Black as well. And that is a huge thing. People want to go to someone that they can connect with. Your therapeutic relationship is a relationship. You know, this is the person that you're telling all your business to, which, you know, to also combat this unprofessional and ghetto thing, it is strictly against our ethical rules to disclose information that is revealed to us within our sessions. We can lose our license for that. Again, we have very, very strict ethical codes that are they cause us to be extremely professional and not ghetto, okay? But people normally want to go to a therapist that they can relate to or they have something in common with. And research shows that treatment will not be successful unless the person likes their therapist. So it doesn't matter how skilled the therapist is, whether or not they're giving you the right treatment. If you do not like them, you will not accomplish much in therapy.
That makes sense.
So thank you for letting me go on my rant, because I'm like, you know, mental health and therapy and treatment and psychologists and mental health counselors, these topics are already taboo in our community. The Black people normally don't go to therapists. So to hear someone who has some type of recognition and audience in the Black community tell Black people that they wouldn't go to a Black therapist, it's a little disheartening because we already don't seek therapy enough. It's funny, I've had people come to me to treat a specific thing, Black people. We treat it, but they don't want to stop seeing me, right? They're like, I want to see you for the rest of my life, okay? And what they say to me is, well, I go to my general practitioner for checkups, my entire life. I go to my dentist. Why wouldn't I go to my doctor of mental health to check up at least once a month for the rest of my life? It's necessary. That mindset, I wish more of the Black community had.
A valid argument. And really speaking on the fact that Black people don't see professional mental health counselors enough, what are your views on the whole idea that therapy as a whole is not necessary and all we need is prayer and the Bible and some anointed oil and talking to the pastor and that's enough?
So I think that belief just comes from a lack of understanding and education. There's a lot of mental health counselors who specifically treat people of certain religions, right? And as a psychologist, we take classes on diversity and they teach us to incorporate, if religion is important to the individual, to incorporate their religious practices into our sessions. So our treatment methods have nothing to do with spirituality. They have nothing to do with religion. So they can be combined with your religious practices. So as far as the Christian religion and the belief in Jesus Christ, well, the Christian Bible in the New Testament, I believe it's in Corinthians, talks about bringing your thoughts unto the subjection and obedience of Christ, right? Well, what do you think a psychologist is helping you do? There is actually a particular treatment method, right, that comes from the theory that thoughts, emotions, and behaviors are all connected, right? And if you can train the thoughts and change the thoughts, you can change the emotions and you can change the behaviors. Well, what is that? That is bringing the mind under subjection.
Yeah.
So it's not a conflict. I think that when people say that, they just don't understand what psychology is. Psychology is the study of the human mind and emotions. It's not something spooky or spiritual or religious. It is a science. And science and religion are not in conflict with each other. Science is man's way of trying to explain some of the phenomenon that religion calls spiritual.
I'm going to list some resources that are actually going to be in the description below for people who may be wanting to try therapy. But do you have any resources off the top of your head?
So I know you asked me specifically about resources for people who do not have insurance. Mm-hmm. Every state is going to have community health care and healthcare systems and organizations that get federal grant funding so that they're able to treat people who are uninsured. So I know in the South Florida area, there is an organization called Care Resource. Their web address is careresource.org. And if it's an organization, then more than likely they're going to be nonprofit and getting some type of grant money or federal funding. But that specific organization, they do a myriad of medical care, including mental health services to the uninsured.
Okay. That's pretty good because I don't even think a lot of people know where to go. So you could probably just do a simple Google search in your state and
and look for community mental health care in a Google search. Yes. Also, there are some psychologists who offer what we call a sliding scale fee. And that is so that they can serve people who don't have insurance. And so that's also something you can put in a Google search, mental health sliding scale. And it may bring up some sites of some people in your area who allow you to pay a minimal fee out of pocket in order to get services.
Okay. Well, I feel like this was great. This is very informative. I appreciate you for getting up so early to talk to me. Yeah, I don't know. Do you have anything else to say to the people, or?
I want to say this. So people think that therapy is for individuals with serious mental health issues, but it's not, right? A lot of people that go to therapy are your average everyday people who just need direction or are at a point where they need to make decisions and they're unsure of the decision, and they need someone just to be there and help them decide what they really want for their life. So, counseling and therapy is not just for people with a clinical diagnosis. Everybody can benefit from having somebody to talk to that's not going to tell your business, that's not going to give you their opinion, and who's going to push you to make the best decisions for you. And essentially, that is what therapy is.
I'm glad you said that. Because a lot of people feel like it's just for crazy people.
I mean, we don't use the term crazy, but no. No, it's not just for, of course, if you have a serious mental health disorder, or if you're seriously depressed, if you're thinking about killing yourself, you want to die, right? If you don't want to live, if you're finding yourself isolated from people and not wanting to deal with the public or others, you should seek mental health help. But it's also for the person that's just like, I feel overwhelmed because I just got married and had a child, and I'm unsure of what to do, or I'm dating this person, I really like them, and I think I want to propose, but I'm not sure, right? Therapy's for that too. There's actually specific people who get a master's degree in marriage and family therapy. They're marriage and family therapists. That is their specialty. That is what they do. Intimate relationships, families, marriage. And they help you navigate through conflicts in those situations. That's specifically what they do. So therapy is for everyone, essentially.
Gotcha. Okay. Well, this was phenomenal. You're phenomenal. Everything about it was great. I hope that anyone watching got plenty of information that they could use for themselves, or share with other people that they care about. And thank you.
My pleasure.